Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. This is the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. right here on thebibleforum.net. We look at life through a biblical lens. We generally solve all the world's problems in 2 hours or less. This evening we're going to be taking a look at Israel and how they seem to be doing over there on the other side of the world. But I wanted to give you a little update first. We just went through Columbus Day. And there are folks in our world who, when it comes time for Columbus Day, they get a little bit irritated because, you know, Columbus didn't really discover the New World. You know, the Indians were already here, Native Americans, and there were other people who have been there, Scandinavians and different ones. And, you know, it's just more of that propaganda that's put out and so forth. Let me tell you the story, and this is part and parcel of where we are in life. We have children who have been raised in government schools and they don't know anything. They know what they've been told, but it's more propaganda than it is fact. And in some cases, some of the things they've been told are just not complete. Christopher Columbus did discover the New World for Spain. That's the point. He discovered the New World for Spain. He discovered the New World for Europe, for the Western society. That's why we have Western things over here that came from Europe. You know, yeah, there were other people that did this. Columbus was looking for a sea route to India and to China. And he was doing that because 40 years earlier, Muslim Turks had conquered Constantinople. Now it's Istanbul, not Constantinople. Remember the song? They did that in 1453, and it cut off the land route to the east. A biography of Columbus was written by Washington Irving in 1828 called A History of the Life and Voyages of Christopher Columbus. It was filled with imaginative dialogue such as Europeans arguing that the earth was flat. The reality is that Europeans knew the earth was not flat. They knew it was round as far back as the 4th century BC. Aristotle discovered that the earth was round. In the 3rd century BC, Eratosthenes computed the circumference of the earth with geometry and measurements of shadows cast by tall objects in Alexandria and Aswan. In the 1st century BC, Posidonius used stellar observations at Alexandria and Rhodes to confirm Eratosthenes' measurements. In the 2nd century AD, astronomer Ptolemy had written a guide to geography in which he described a spherical earth with one ocean connecting Europe and Asia. St. Isidore of Seville, Spain, wrote in the 7th century that the earth was round. Around the year 723 AD, St. Bede the Venerable wrote in his work, Reckoning of Time, that the earth was spherical. The book of Isaiah, which predates all of them, in chapter 40, verse 22, states that it is he that sitteth upon the globe of the earth. Columbus knew the earth was round. The question was not there. The question was only how far around. And he miscalculated. He didn't understand about the Western Hemisphere. The length of a mile was in question. Columbus had read a book entitled Imago Mundi, in which a fellow estimated that a degree of latitude at the equator was around 56.7 miles. What Columbus did not realize was that this was expressed in longer Arabic miles rather than the shorter Roman miles. After 5 weeks at sea, he should have been there, but he wasn't there. He ended up in the Caribbean or the Caribbean. Columbus had read Marco Polo, in his travels to China and to India back in the 12th, 13th century. He studied Pliny's natural history. He was an intelligent man. He may even possibly have seen maps rumored to have been in Portugal's royal archives from China's treasure fleets, which were sent out in 1421. Columbus corresponded with Florentine physician Paolo dal Pozzo Tacanelli, who suggested China was just 5,000 miles west of Portugal. And based on all of that, he took off. He didn't get there. It's just one of those things in history. But where he did get was to the New World that he had discovered. Nobody knew it was here. There might have been a captain of a ship and some sailors who found some stuff, but they didn't understand what they had and they didn't know it. In 1498, Portuguese sailor Vasco da Gama did make it around South Africa to India. Of course, 6 years before that, the Catholic monarchs of Ferdinand and Isabella finished driving the Muslims out of Spain and wanted to join the quest for a sea trade route to India. That's why they backed Columbus's idea. He was an Italian. Anyway, he made friends with the natives. He named the island that he found San Salvador for the Holy Savior. Christian as they may or may not have been, they had a God consciousness. And he said, so that they might be well disposed toward us, for I knew that they were a people to be converted to our Holy Father, rather by love than by force. I gave to some red caps and to others glass beads. They became so entirely our friends that I believed that they would easily be made Christians. Christopher Columbus. On and on you go. Are you paying attention to the Middle East? I try to give you updates on this periodically. Stuff happens so fast, it's hard to keep track. I thought I had maybe I do somewhere, I'll find it as we're talking. I thought I had some notes that I scribbled down just this evening on the subject, statistics, but I can't find them. The Bible teaches us that we are to keep our eye on the western sky. When the beginning of the end starts, it'll be over there. It'll be in the Middle East. The Bible talks about a conflict among Eastern players that will be so intense that it will impact world peace. It will impact world economics. It'll impact world stability. The West will send a military emissary to settle that issue, and he will come with all the authority he needs to take control and to settle things, perhaps the United Nations. That he will be unable to do so is what the Bible is about in the book of the Revelation. It's what creates the scenarios that we see alluded to in that last book of the Bible. The current American government wants out. They want out of Iraq. They want out of Afghanistan. They actually want out and away from Persia. They want to get out of the region. It's a quagmire. There's no solution. There are just too many differing opinions and powerful forces. You cannot settle this area. Our government wants to make nice with Israel, and they also wants to make nice with the Palestinians. The Palestinians want Israel to stop building in the West Bank. Now, it's hard to picture the West Bank if you haven't got a map or you haven't thought about this or looked it up. It isn't just really that which is west of Jerusalem, or on the west side, the Jerusalem side of the Jordan. It's an area all the way up as well, above Jerusalem. We would have called it Judea. And from Sea of Galilee and down through Jerusalem and below. This whole area, when you look at a map of the Middle East and you see this area carved out and say that's Israel, that's what they're talking about. If Israel keeps building on the West Bank and putting her people in those houses, more and more Palestinians are going to be pushed out, and they're going to lose their heritage. At least that's their mentality. And in order to stop that, they have done all sorts of things. They have sent terrorists in there for generations. And the result is that Israel has built a fence, a wall, around her territory to keep these people out. There's all these people look very similar. They speak the language. There are Palestinian Arabs who live in Israel. There are Jews that live in the Palestinian areas. This is a very cross-pollinated event. They built the walls. People go, oh, you're terrible, you're building a, yeah, it's called self-preservation. They started lobbing missiles in. Of course, Persia and Syria and others were supplying these missiles. We sent Israel the, what's that dome, that something dome thing, to shoot down the missiles. It's been very effective. So now what can they do? Well, they took to terrorization. They started blowing themselves up on the streets, in the buses, places like that. This was devastating. But Israel has gotten a hold of most of all of these things. But now they're attacking people on the street. Have you seen the videos? The material I was looking for was a statistic that I had just gotten from a friend I don't know in Israel, sends me an update periodically, and it was a rundown of the last 18 days and the number of attacks. The attacks are over 50 in 18 days, 50 separate attacks. 7 people have died. Jews, Israelis have died. More than that, Palestinians have died. But these people are just walking down the street like you and like me, paying no attention to anybody, and then all of a sudden they've got a knife or a screwdriver and they're jamming it in your neck. And they also showed in this email, it showed a drawing of the upper torso of a being and the spots where the attacks were being made. And it's all from the heart area of the chest and upwards. They're going for death, immediate and sure. And this is a form of terrorism that nobody's really been exposed to lately. And all of this is because they have this idea that they were there first and that Israel is the interloper. To prove their point, they have been digging under the Temple Mount for decades and hauling everything out they can find for fear that there would be some semblance of Israel found in that spot. They can't tolerate that. Well, there has been stuff found and continues to be found. It isn't something that's working. But if you look at history, you realize that the folks they're calling Palestinians today were never a people group. Jews were called Palestinians. The Romans gave them that name because the area was called Palestine. That's the name Rome gave that region. And if you lived there, you were a Palestinian, Jew, Arab, didn't matter who you were. When Israel was given the land, initially they were given all of Saudi Arabia, all of Iraq, much of Syria, and all of the area that they now call home. Jordan as well. But the Arabs complained. It seems after the First World War, Arabs had been in league with Great Britain, helped them out a great deal. You've seen the movies, you've seen the documentaries, all of those sorts of things. And they wanted a piece of the pie. And so Great Britain gave Saudi Arabia to the Saudis. But then the precursors to the Jordanians came along and said, what about us? And I can never remember who they are, Hashmonites or Hasmoneans. They're not Arabs. They're different. They actually can make things and fly airplanes and drive cars and stuff like that. Arabs do next to nothing. So they gave them Jordan. And then they carved up the area, and, Iraq got some, the Kurds got a little something, all of this took place. So there wasn't a whole lot of land left. But they were given a strip of land in what we now call the Middle East and the area there where Israel is. And 7 nations, 7 Arab and Jordanian nations banded together and attacked Israel the day that it was announced by the United Nations that Israel was now a nation. And 7 nations of the world attacked at once from all sides. And Israel was able to beat them back. And America didn't help. They used leftover weaponry from the Second World War. And they were able to win enough to stop this, slow it down, and the UN stepped in to call a truce. And let's see if we can't find a peaceful solution, because the 7 nations were getting beat up. The inhabitants that lived in the area were told by their neighbors, their compadres, to leave. We don't want you to die in this thing. We're going to go in and we're going to kill everybody we can find, and we don't want to do that to you, so get out. And they did. The idea was that once the Jews were killed off, you could come back and you could have anything you want because you got all their stuff. Well, it really worked the other way around. Jordan still has Arab refugees from 1948 living, not as Jordanians. They won't allow them to integrate into their society. They're still living in these camps, places they built to hold them. Thousands of these people, and they're multiplying. Israel came in not to take over, but the history shows us that when they showed up, they bought the land they sit on. These folks abandoned their property. When it was clear they weren't coming back, they squatted. They went in and took care of it. But prior to that, they bought and paid for everything they had. And the Egyptians carved out this little place called Gaza Strip, and they went back to that. That's where they were from. They're Egyptians, basically. And that has grown now into this hotbed of danger, terrorism and all sorts of things. And the world has been sympathetic because history has been rewritten. It's really not like that. Last week we were talking about the Battle of Gog-Magog, and that's still in the news. It's being discussed. Turkey is now upset. They're upset that Russia is helping the Kurds. These are tensions that are not going to go away. Iran is Persia, and Russia are in league with Syria. Supposedly, Russia is fighting ISIS, but the reality is they're just carving out a safe zone for Assad. Whoever is against Assad is the one they're bombing, and they're thumbing their nose at us. They don't care. But now they've antagonized the Turks. Turks don't take this stuff easily. And the Kurds have given the Turks grief, as well as the Iraqis. The Iraqis were never able to take the Kurds. And I don't think ISIS has done any better. And Persia's lingering in the woods, threatening Yemen. They've got their people down there around the Horn. Saudi Arabia is scared to death. She's buying these dome things, these things that shoot down the rockets to protect herself from Persia. The place is coming unglued. What the Bible says is that it will continue to do this, that these things will happen, and it will get out of control. And Israel will find that she is at the brunt of this attack, and so will Christians. And they will be killed off. They will be persecuted and killed. And it will get so desperate that Israel will cry out to their God for help. They will call upon their Messiah to save them. And he will. That's what signals the end of the Great Tribulation, the beginning of the millennial reign of Christ, when Jesus returns to settle this issue. The Bible says only a third of Israel will survive this. Right now, the Palestinians are waging a war of terrorism in the streets. Our Secretary of State, John Kerry, speaking in Boston, talking about this event to an audience at Harvard University, says there's been a massive increase in settlements over the course of the last years. And there's an increase in the violence because there's this frustration that's growing. Also, there's a frustration among Israelis who don't see any end. So all this terrorism from the Palestinians is because they're building in the West Bank. That is either deliberate obfuscation or the man just doesn't know history. And he's been taken to task for this. People around the world from all different quarters, even liberals, are saying, John, have you read the paper? Have you read history? Do you know anything at all? The reality is a rogue imam has called for this, in part because the, not just Palestinian, but the Muslims seriously believe that Israel wants to take over the Temple Mount. They want to let Jews up there to pray. And there's been a resurgence of desire among Jews to reconstitute their worship. And they need a temple to do that. And they can't put the temple just wherever they want. They have to put it there. And so this is the pressure. And the Muslims don't believe the Israelis when they say they don't want to do this. It's being orchestrated by the imams and by the political leaders and by all of these other actors in the group or in the area. And it's not going to go away just because somebody in Washington or in New York has a vote to decide that we're going to settle this thing. Jim Phillips, an expert on the Middle East at the Heritage Foundation, sees Hamas-Fatah dispute underlying the violence. Hamas has gained strength in the West Bank and would probably overthrow the Palestinian Authority if it wasn't backed up by Israel. On Wednesday of this past week, the White House said Secretary of State John Kerry was going to travel to the region and try to help with this conflict. I believe he's going to meet with Netanyahu in Germany. He will fail, as all other efforts have failed. There will be no peace in the region until Jesus comes. And when is that? after that horrific description in the Bible of what is referred to as the Great Tribulation, a time when almost nobody will survive, Jesus will call a halt to it, and not before. And what that means is that we are that close. I know. Every generation has said, you know, the coming of the Lord's right around the corner. No generation has seen this. This is absolutely amazing. The prophecy is that it will happen in one generation. And the experts are looking at 1948 and saying Israel is back in the land. And now that she's back in the land, it can happen. And now that these things are unfolding, when it gets going, one generation. It's not going to take 100 years. It'll take about 20. Where are we in the calendar? I have no idea. But I keep my eyes open and my ears peeled. You would do well to think about what will happen after.